Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be looking at a game called Oranges and Lemons. Now in this game you take on the role of a merchant in the early 18th century London. You start with 2 workers, no form of transportation, and you can really only store what you can hold in your 2 hands. Now the goal of the game is to expand your reach, increase your storage capacity, fulfill orders that are coming into the docks, and hopefully invest in the East India Corporation ships to get a bountiful return. And of course become the best merchant in 18th century London. Now the game is a worker placement game, but with a slight twist. All the players' workers are placed in a line around the central cathedral on the game board. Whichever worker is at the front of the line, the owning player will place it into one of these 16 areas. Once all workers are placed, you go through the action phase where all 16 areas are triggered one after the other, starting at 1 and ending at 16. And when activated, the workers go back into the line. This means that every round there's no kind of strict turn order. It's the order of the workers in line that will dictate who goes next. So, why oranges and lemons? Well, it's actually from an old nursery rhyme which refers to the bells of churches in the city of London and the trades and activities in the medieval and early modern time that are associated with them. Now, this actually nursery rhyme, I knew the first parts of the rhyme, but never really thought about it before. Luckily, they included the rhyme in the rulebook, and it gives you some historical background to basically all the churches. So, will this game be as good as some fresh oranges and lemons, or should be passed over looking for some fresher fruit? Let's get at the table, see how it's played, and I'll come back with my final thoughts on Oranges and Lemons. Here's Oranges and Lemons set up. Each player receives their player board, and workers are placed along the side of the cathedral in the snake fashion. So first player, second player, third player, then fourth, third, second, and first. Players place the transaction marker and share price markers on their appropriate sections. Their bells go into the spot, and the upgrade tiles go on their spots. Players get coins based on turn order, and the rest are placed off to the side. Fill the warehouses with their respective resources, lemons, bricks, pancakes, and pans, and fill the market spaces with the same resources. The loan tiles are split by cost, and the share price marker starts at 1. Split the EIC ship tiles, those the East India Company ship tiles, into their types, and Era 1 and some of Era 3s go in the bag, and the rest of Era 3 and Era 2s go off to the side. Place the overlay on space 12. Randomly place out 5 random level 1 cargo tiles in their spots, then take all the level 3 tiles, based on the player count, and shuffle them. Then shuffle the level 2s and place 10 on top of the level 3s. All unused tiles go back in the box. Votes are shuffled and placed on their spot, and VP tokens are placed in their spot. Now the game is played over a number of rounds, typically around 12, but will depend on how quickly the Stepney docks are emptied of cargo tiles. In each round, players will take their turns placing out their workers in the order they appear around the cathedral. Once all the workers have been placed, locations are triggered in order, starting with location 1 and ending at location 16. As workers are activated, they are returned to the cathedral in the order that they were triggered. Players can add bells to locations which will give them bonuses, sometimes resources in the round, or maybe a discount for taking that action, or a bonus when you take an action at that location. Bells are also worth points at the end of the game. So let's go through a round. The first phase is worker placement. When their worker is at the front of the line, the player will place it into a worker placement spot in one of the areas. Some spots require you to pay to place a worker there, and it must be played at the time your worker is placed. Now there is one exception, St. Catherine's, which you'll place your worker directly on an item you wish to use when it's triggered, not in a worker placement spot across the top like the other areas. Once all the workers have been placed, move on to the action phase. Start with location 1, St. Clement's, and activate the workers there from left to right. Once a worker has been activated, again return them to the first empty spot in the line of the cathedral. Since these actions are the heart of the game, let's quickly go through them. St. Clement's, spend money to get lemons. Each worker there can do a single purchase of an available row. Quick note about resources. At the start of the game, you only have 1 empty spot for storing resources on your player board. You will be able to upgrade that later on. St. Margaret's, get some coins. Worker in the leftmost spot gets 4, the worker in the right spot gets 2 coins. St. Giles, spend money to get bricks. St. Martin's, spend money to take a loan, 5 gold for level 1, 10 for level 2, and 15 for level 3. You can only issue a level 2 loan if you already have issued a level 1, and same for the level 3, only if you have a level 2 and a level 1. In this game, loans are good. You're issuing them. At the end of each round, you're going to receive income for every loan that you've issued. St. Peter's, spend money to get pancakes. Whitechapel allows you to place out a bell. Level 1 for 5 gold, level 2 for 10, or level 3 for 15. Same as with loans, you have to have placed at least 1 lower level bell before you place a higher level bell. Bells are placed at locations around the board to give you that bell bonus. I'm not going to go through all the bell bonuses in this walkthrough though. There can only be 1 bell at each location, and you can bump another player's bell as long as you are placing a larger bell. The bumped bell is then placed into any other empty location. If there's no possible places for the bumped bell, you can always place it at St. Peter's and receive 3 coins. St. Catherine's allows you to sell the good your workers beside for the price that your worker is on. You can sell as many of that particular good as you want for single action. St. John's allows you one of 3 options, either 3 gold, 2 VP, or either 1 lemon or 1 brick. The worker on the blue spot doesn't move to the back of the line. They are actually placed on the blue spot at the front of the line. At St. Anne's, you spend some money to buy pans. Aldgate allows you to upgrade your storage. Now this has to be done in order starting from your original storage spot. Pay the price to remove one of the connected storage tiles. St. Helens allows you to buy or sell shares. You can either buy 1 or 2 shares for the current share price and move your marker up that share track, or you can sell any number of shares for the current market value and move your marker down that many steps. Location 12, the Old Bailey, is probably the most complicated section and will always trigger even if there are no player workers there. There's always going to be a custom inspector there and they always action first at this spot. The arrival of the East Indian ships usually affected the stock market. When the custom inspector is triggered, draw 2 tiles out of the bag and place them on the left 2 spots. Starting with the leftmost spot, change the stock market tracker. Red is for down, green is for up. If it says 50%, you reduce the stock price by half. Now the players on the left spot can claim one of the ships, and then the other player gets to claim the other ship. Now these ships can be immediate resources, or they can be a reoccurring effect. If you receive resources that you cannot store, leave them on this ship. They can be sold at location 13 or used at location 14 or 15. If they're still on your ship at the end of the round, you have the opportunity to sell them during that end of round phase. Location 13 allows you to buy and sell resources. Each worker can purchase any number of resources in any combination for the prices printed on the board. A worker can also sell goods to empty spots for the price printed on the board. Stepney allows you to fulfill the cargo requests, discard the resources depicted, and receive the award. Each worker here can only fulfill 1 cargo. Once you've discarded the resources and taken the reward, place the tile face down beside your player board. St. Paul's is where you can recruit extra workers. Pay the number of resources based on if this is your 3rd, 4th, or 5th worker. When the active worker is placed back in the cathedral, place the newly acquired worker behind it. And finally, Bow. Here you can buy votes. For each worker, take one of the face-down vote tiles and keep it hidden in front of you. So that's all the locations. After all the workers have been activated, you move to the end of round phase. Here you're going to refill any warehouse spaces, but not their shortage market. Activate any of the end of round bells that have been placed. If you have your ship upgrade, gain a point. For each loan you have, you receive income. For any resources left on your EIC ship, it has to be stored or sold to an empty spot in the market. If you cannot store it nor sell it, it's just discarded. At the docks, if there are 2 or more empty slots, move them all down and refill. If there's less than 2 empty slots, remove tiles from the front until there are 2 empty slots. Shuffle the cargo down and fill in the spaces and refill. Once per game, there's going to be a change ship tile in that cargo pile. Remove the ship price from location 12, empty the bag, and refill it with a set-aside pile of ships. At the end of the game, you're going to score a lot of points. You're going to score points from your votes collected, the value of your loans. Every 5 coins you have left over is a point. For each share held is a point, and score additional points if you have at least 4, 7, or 10 shares. Any VIP on your delivered ship tiles scores. Any storage upgrades. Resource cubes are 1 VP for a lemon or brick, and 2 VP for each pancake or pan. Place spells are worth 3, 7, or 12 points depending on their size. Score points for the highest point value you've passed on the transaction track, and score any miscellaneous VP tokens you've collected during the game. Further to that, players will also score points for having the most VPs from vote tiles, most VPs from ship tiles, most VPs from loans, having the most gold, most VPs from place spells, most cargo tiles, most shares, or who has made the most transactions. For each of those categories, the player with the most gets 5 points, and the second gets 3 points. And the player with the most points is the winner. Let's get back to see what I thought about oranges and lemons. Okay, on to theme components. So I'm kind of in 2 minds when it comes to the theme on this one. I like that they tied the action spaces to the churches, and I get the church's connection via the nursery rhyme as to what trades they're tied to. But what am I doing with a cart full of pancakes? Now, I think if I kind of stretch my imagination, I can kind of get the theme in this one. Like, for example, buying bells is patronizing the churches so you get preferential treatment there. And backing the East India Company ships is a risk. So I guess the theme works in the sense of becoming a successful merchant. It doesn't really help in teaching and understanding the game flow, though. For the components, I'm not sure what I feel about the art in this game. I get what they're going for, just not sure that style is for me. I also feel that the game is a table hog. The main board is large, probably definitely larger than it really needs to be. The iconography is pretty good and makes sense. The rulebook is decent, as are the components. Now, the look of this game when it's on the table definitely gives you an old Euro game look to it. Not necessarily a bad thing, the game just looks a little dated. Now for the gameplay, I found that main mechanism of that worker placement piece probably the most interesting part of the game. And it is pretty interesting. The idea of first planning out what you need to do to get done in the round and making sure you're taking the actions kind of at the right time. There's no point in getting a lot of resources if you won't be buying an upgraded transport until later in the round. And part of that planning is also the turn order and seeing where the other players went. If I really need lemons, do I spend my very first action to go there? If someone else goes there before I do I really want to spend more money for a single lemon? Although this mechanism is not new, it is nice to see it, and it was actually implemented very well in this game. Now, I always like worker placement games, but here you're making more of a tactical decisions than strategic. Where you place your worker when it's available is less about trying to fulfill a long-term strategy, but more of what's available, where do I need to go next, where have the other players gone, and do I care about turn order? Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but can put major kinks into your overall strategy if you have something planned out you want to do for the game. I also felt that many parts of the games were scripted. Not many, some parts were scripted. You have to get a transport upgrade, and at least one, maybe hopefully more, as soon as possible. This means that everyone goes to Aldgate on the first turn, and if not then, usually maybe the first placement of the second turn. I wish there were other options where you could do things like this, but I guess to keep the theme and the tension, this is how they wanted it. I did find that the game has a decent game arc. At the start of the game, you're kind of doing nothing really but kind of growing up your business. Getting more storage spaces, maybe an extra worker or two, or maybe gambling on the ships. But as you grow, the game seems to grow through the contracts or the cargo. You'll be able to do more, and there are better options for you to spend your money as the resources as the game goes on. You kind of shift to where you're going to be focusing on. The game does go on a bit too long, which I'm sure can be adjusted through the removing of some of the cargo tiles, but I'm kind of not sure how that would affect the balance. And to that end, I also prefer this with 3, maybe 4 players. But playing at 5 I felt was just too long. And at 2 players, I didn't feel the tension like you do at 3 and 4. Now with the scoring, it's interesting. Everything scores. I mean, everything on the board scores. That majority scoring also throws a wrench into the mix. If you're trying to figure out who's in the lead in the middle of the game, you can't. Even having 1 vote tile, if no one else has one, can be worth a fair number of points. For the vote itself, and for having the majority in votes. There are 17 different things they're going to score, including the majorities. So you won't know who won really until that very last thing is scored. This does make it hard to judge how you're kind of doing during the game. So would I recommend this? I would. It's a good, solid, old school Euro. Nothing is new, but the package here just works pretty well. I like the theme and the tie-in to the nursery rhyme. I appreciate that it's a pretty quick teach as well. The only real wrinkle is those EIC ships. They slightly slow down the round, but I like that there's kind of a bit of a gambling feel to it. I like that there are many ways to get points in this game. There are some parts you can kind of completely ignore if you decide to specialize in a few areas. I like the arc of the gameplay as well. As you get more powerful, you're going to be shifting to where you're going to be taking your actions. For the negatives, I do find that the game goes on a bit too long. I also found that the first round or two was maybe a bit too scripted in what the players wanted to accomplish. Not saying that there's no options, but getting a transport upgrade early ties into a lot of the different strategies on in the game. I also didn't like the game didn't scale that well. I much prefer my plays at 3 and 4 than at 2 or 5. The game also really doesn't do anything new. Yes, it does it well, but is that enough to keep me wanting to come back year after year? Not so sure. Overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10 and the Dice Tower seal of approval. As much as I enjoy my plays of this one, which is why it gets a seal of approval, I do worry about the longevity of it and why it doesn't get any higher. Will I still be playing this in years' time? I'm not sure, but I am enjoying my plays of it right now. But that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey folks, thanks for joining us for that video. If you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hey, make sure you check out what's happening where I'll cover an app on an iOS or a Switch device, and you can check it out along with me. Thanks very much. You've been watching The Dice Tower.